Prosperity now. So what the heck is prosperity? You know, in Unity, we talk a lot about prosperity. A lot of times when I talk about prosperity, people will say to me, well, prosperity is more than money. And that always, to me, sounds defensive, and it denigrates the idea of money, because money is an important part of our prosperity. I always look up words that I use to find out if there's a meaning that I'm not aware of. And so I looked up prosperity, which means well-being, that everything's fine, going to be okay, and we can rest in this assurance of that. But as I looked up this word, I found something really interesting. Prosperity is a way of living. And I thought, yeah, that's right. But right below that was poverty is a way of living. I never thought of it that way. And I don't like to say poverty, I like to say not enoughness, but poverty means not having enough of the necessities of life. And I thought, as I was thinking about this, I thought about the gentleman that used to live next door to us. Well, the gentleman and his family. We had bought a house in what you might call a subdivision, except that it was one long row of houses. Must have been 5 or 6, maybe 7 blocks long. And this house that was next to ours, with a lot in between, belonged to a guy named Dick. And I got to talking to Dick one day, and I found out he was a millionaire. Now, his house was a little upscale from ours and very nice, but you wouldn't guess it was a millionaire's house. And he told me his story. He was a sugar beet farmer. I don't know if you know about sugar beets, but at one time, sugar beets were a big source of our sugar. And a lot of the sugar beets were grown in Michigan. And so Dick was a sugar beet farmer, and he loved farming. It was his life passion. He loved to be out there in the tractor and watch this wonderful thing that we call life move through those sugar beets. Now, Dick was not a religious person, but he knew there was something in the universe, that life spirit that was in and through all things and always moving towards something good. Well, this sugar beet field, you know, our house was built in front of that sugar beet field, and it was kind of a little ridge, and we had to put a little stone wall in back. This sugar beet field was really huge, and in back of the field was this river, Tittabawassee River. And in the spring, often it would overflow its banks, and so we had these walls so that if water got up that high, we'd be safe. It did once when I was there. But Dick said I wasn't always a millionaire, and I had 2 really bad years with my crop. The first year was kind of okay. The field had flooded and my crop just wasn't any good. And he said that, you know, being a farmer, they would save some money when stuff was good, so they'd have some money during the lean times. So this was a lean time, and he knew that there was something moving through and that everything was coming around in a good way. Well, the next year was another year when his crop did not mature. It was not a good crop. The river flooded, and so he lost all his sugar beets. Now that year was really, really hard because they didn't have very many savings because they just used their money the year before. But they made it through okay. And he knew that everything was going to be okay. And then one day he had a knock on his door. And there were a couple of gentlemen all dressed up in suits, and they wanted to buy his sugar beet field. They wanted to buy it to put a golf course in his sugar beet field. Where we lived was the city was on one side of the road, and the country was on the other side, and we lived on the countryside. So they wanted to buy the sugar beet field, and they offered him a good price, and he says, no, I don't want to sell. I like being a farmer. So they kept after him to sell that sugar beet field for their golf course. And every time they asked, the price went up. And finally, he decided he would sell it. And he would still be a farmer because they made arrangements, because this property was so big, that they could have a smaller sugar beet field and he could still be a farmer. And so it was okay. So they started to build this golf course. And he had all this money. But his standard of living didn't go up all that much. They rebuilt their house so it was more comfortable for them to live in, and it was a little upscale. They drove nice cars. They gave a lot and supported the local boys club. That was their thing. They didn't hold on to it. But you'd never know that they had a lot of money. They lived their prosperity. They had a prosperity living. They were doing fine. And he said to me, one of the things that we did and we still do, is to be willing to look to see where God is. Not God, but where this life force is moving in their lives. And they did that. And then they just gave thanks for what they had. That was part of their process. They were living their prosperity. When I was a kid, even when I was an adult, my family owned a bakery. And I worked in the bakery, and on Saturday, we had a counter downtown in one of the nicer restaurants. And on Saturday, I worked behind the counter. Every Saturday morning, a little lady, I don't know how old she was, but we called her an old lady, would come in, and she would be dressed, no matter what the weather, she would be dressed in this black coat, buttoned to the top, with one of those old 1920 hats, the coat, with a hat pin that went in this side and came out the other. And she always carried a bag with her, and it was about the size of a regular tote bag, but it was, I think we used to call it oilskin. It was black and funny. If you're old enough, you know what it was. Inside that bag, she had a paper bag. Inside the paper bag, she had a purse. Inside the purse, she had another purse. And inside that purse, she had a change purse that was wrapped in paper and had a rubber band around it. She would buy 2 loaves of day-old bread. Now, in those days, if it wasn't baked that day, we sold it the next day for day-old. It didn't stand on the counter for 5 days with something in it to make it feel fresh. So she would come in and buy these 2 loaves of bread, which was 10 cents. So she'd go through this whole process of getting to her 10 cents, which was in that little purse. And so we would stand there while she did all this, and she wouldn't talk. She didn't talk to us. She just told us she wanted 2 loaves of day-old bread. So we figured she must be really poor. And every once in a while, if we had them, we would give her a couple of sweet rolls. And she would stand down at the corner of the showcase and eat those rolls right there, every crumb. There was not one crumb left, and she left. One day, she didn't come in, and we wondered where she was. And the next Saturday, she didn't come in. And the next Saturday, she didn't come in. And we heard that her neighbors, which she never talked to, her neighbors hadn't seen her out and about for a while, so they called the police. And her house was one of these wooden houses that have been there for a long time and are all black and kind of shabby. So they knocked on the door and nobody came, and so they broke in. And they were greeted with an amazing thing. On each side of the door were bundles of newspapers and old magazines neatly tied in bundles. She had a path, a literal path, that went to her bedroom, her bathroom, and the kitchen. So they went to the kitchen, and she had expired. You know, she went on to her maker. So she didn't have any relatives, and so the house sat there for a long time. And then it was such a eyesore. The city decided to tear it down. You know, what else do you do it? There's no relatives around, so they tore it down. And as they're tearing it down, they dropped a bundle of magazines. And the rope broke. And out of those magazines tumbled dollar bills, stocks, bonds. And when they totaled it all up, it was $1.5 million. Now, $1.5 million in 1947 or 48 was a lot of money. She lived in poverty. So it doesn't make any difference how much money we have or not. We can either live from a prosperous point of view or poverty point of view. I was kind of surprised as I was going and looking up prosperity. And one of the things they talked about was trust and loyalty. Have you ever thought about loyalty connected with God or prosperity or anything? When you're loyal to something or somebody, you know absolutely that that is going to be there no matter what. And I got to thinking about prosperity, and I thought, how many of us are loyal to our prosperity? How many of us trust prosperity? How many of us trust that life-giving energy that Dick saw? How many of us really trust that? Most of us go back and forth, living in not enoughness, that I like to use rather than poverty. Most of us go back and forth. You know, are we willing to look where God is working in our life? Well, maybe today and maybe not tomorrow. We're not loyal to that idea. And we don't trust it. What happens when we're loyal to an idea? Dick was loyal to an idea. He trusted it. Jane, the little old lady, was loyal, and she trusted it. She was loyal to living in poverty. And how many of us are loyal to live not enoughness? Now, I don't think we're going to live in prosperity 100% of the time if we're talking about money. But we can in our attitude and our being. We are truth students. Robert was talking last week about truth, the word truth. There's a small t and a capital T. And we are truth students with a capital T. What does that mean? What is the truth with that capital T? What is it? It is right here, right now. It is in this place. Prosperity is in this place right now. We are prosperous right now. So, what is a truth student? You're one, or you wouldn't be here. A truth student knows that God is always present, that there is a wealth around us, and that wealth is God's substance. And that God's substance, you know, I was talking a couple of weeks ago, that we have this energy around us that science called something else, and it's all these little lights in there. That's God's substance. And it responds to us. They've done experiments where when we talk to it, it responds to us. So, if we have a consciousness of lack, how much is that God substance going to be with us? You know, we're magnetic beings. And you know, a magnet, if you hold it one way, attracts stuff. And if you hold it the other way, it pushes away. So when we're not realizing that that substance is around us, we push it away. And we push it away, we're pushing away our good. We're not willing to look at what we have and be grateful for it. We push it away. Or we can begin to practice our truth principles and begin to live that prosperous life. I love Daily Word today. It's about consciousness. And truth students live consciously. Most of us are a slave to our thinking. You know, Jane, the little old lady, was a slave to her thinking. And to be a slave to your thinking is always doing the same thing. Always thinking the same thoughts. And we don't realize that we do that. But we do. It's one of the things that we do that lets us know what's bad and what's good, whether we can cross the street or not. It's the thing that says, well, I don't have enough money to afford this. Or it says, oh, thank you, God, for the abundance I have. That consciousness is where we begin, because our consciousness either pulls our goodness to us or pushes it away. Truth students know that we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws. And the laws are the laws of consciousness and how we choose to live. What are those laws? We have those laws encased in 5 principles. Are we loyal, and do we truly know that there's only one presence and one power in the world? Or do we get involved in appearances that there's not enough, like Jane? Or do we know that there is enough, even though it doesn't look like it? That God is there and God will take care of us. We know, too, that there's something for us to do. You know, when God created the world, and she or he or whatever it was, listed, created us, male and female, and listed everything that God made to support us. And he said something very important. Take care of it. Take care of it. Are we consciousness to take care of our thoughts? Do we take care of what we have? Do we bless it? Do we bless it? One of the things I hear as a minister is, well, there's rich people, they have a lot of money and they don't pray, but they do. They pray for money. And they pray it in different ways. They have a consciousness that draws it to them. I knew 2 brothers, and they had this wonderful contest going on. Who could create or earn or open themselves to the most money in a year? And whoever won got to buy a beer in their old hangout. So they would go through this, and they had more, the saying, they had more money than God. And they did have a lot of money because they had a money consciousness. They drew it to us, drew it to them. And they were loyal to that idea. They knew that it was going to work, because it did in the past. So we can choose to live either in abundance and prosperity, or we can choose to live in poverty and lack. It's up to us to take care of our thought, to live consciously, and remember and notice when we're off track. And we'll go, we'll get on track and we'll go along and we know everything's going to be fine, and then all of a sudden, without noticing it, we fall off and we get back into our old thinking. The thing is that no matter how long it takes, when we wake up and see how we're thinking, it doesn't make any difference. It's just an oops, and we bring our attention back that there's only one presence and one power in all the universe, and it is love. It loves us, and it prospers us as long as we know that it's there and are loyal to it. So, prosperity right now, right here. I would like you to affirm prosperity is right here, right now. Together? Prosperity is right here, right now. Prosperity is mine. Together? Prosperity is mine. And I accept prosperity. Together? I accept prosperity. And we say, oh, thank you, God, for every good thing. And that's the truth.